Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. Jason Chandler sat on the soft leather couch, his eyes deep in the screen of his cell phone. A suffocating silence filled the living room. Only the ticking of the antique wall clock on the wall sounded like an invisible hammer, striking his nerves one after another. Suddenly, the phone vibrated and the name, Karen, popped up on the screen. Jason's heart skipped a beat and his fingers hung above the answer button, hesitant. He knew deep down that this phone call could change the course of his life forever. Shit, he cursed under his breath, eventually picking up the phone. Hi, honey. Karen's voice came through the receiver with an imperceptible hint of nervousness. I just got to Vegas. Jason closed his eyes and forced himself to stay calm. Good, he replied, his voice so smooth that he surprised even himself. Is everything going well? Yes, everything is fine. Karen paused and Jason could almost picture her biting her lower lip on the other end of the phone. I may need to stay a few more days. The company wants me to work on a new project. Jason's hands clenched involuntarily, his knuckles white from the effort. He knew it was another lie, but he forced himself to say, yeah, no problem. Work is important, I understand. Thank you, Jason. I promise I'll be back as soon as I can. Karen's voice held a hint of guilt. I love you. I love you too, Jason replied mechanically, the once emotionally charged words now so pale. After hanging up, Jason slammed his cell phone down hard on the coffee table with a muffled thud. He covered his face with his hands, feeling a wave of exhaustion and pain like no other. Why, Karen? He murmured, pain and confusion in his voice. Is our marriage really that worthless to you? Jason stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, the world was peaceful. The neighbors' houses were lit up and laughter was faintly heard. His home, on the other hand, is shrouded in the shadow of betrayal. He turned to look around the home they had built together. The wedding photos hanging on the wall seemed to mock his naivety silently. In that photo, Karen had a happy smile on her face and Jason's eyes were filled with a vision of the future. In retrospect, were those fond memories also just an elaborate hoax? Jason walked towards his study and decided to go through the heartbreaking investigation report again. Maybe in those cold words and harsh photographs, he could find some clues to understand exactly when the marriage began to crumble. Pushing open the door to the study, Jason's eyes were immediately drawn to the brown craft paper bag on the table. He knows it's filled with photos and videos taken by a private investigator, ones that mercilessly reveal the evidence of Karen's betrayal. He took a deep breath and slowly made his way to the desk. Every step felt like a step towards the abyss, but he knew that he had to face this harsh reality. Jason opened the folder with a shaky hand, and the photos slipped out of it and scattered across the desktop. Each one was like a sharp knife, stabbing hard into his heart. Photos of Karen and Greg talking intimately in the hotel lobby. The two shared a dinner at a fancy restaurant, raising their glasses and smiling at each other. At the end, it's a picture of them walking into their hotel room hand in hand. Jesus, Jason groaned lowly. He dropped into his chair, his hands gripping the edge of the table. 10 years of marriage shattered by betrayal and lies. Jason felt a wave of loneliness and anger like no other. He thought of Emma, their lovely daughter. His heart twisted even more at the thought of how Karen had lied to Emma as if nothing had happened. Jason stood up, walked over to the bookshelf, and took down a bottle of whiskey he'd had for years. He poured himself a glass and drank it down. The spiciness of the alcohol burned his throat, but it did nothing to soothe the pain in his heart. He picked up his cell phone again and hesitated before dialing his best friend Ron's number. Hey, Jason. Ron's voice came through the receiver. What's up, man? Ron, Jason's voice caught a little. Can you come over here? I need to talk to someone. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment, and Ron seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. Sure thing, man. I'll be right over. Hanging up the phone, Jason walked over to the window again and looked out at the night sky. He knew that from tonight on, his life would never be the same again. But no matter how hard the road ahead was, he was determined to face it with courage, because he understands that sometimes the end is also a new beginning. The doorbell interrupted Jason's thoughts. He rose slowly, dragging his heavy steps toward the door. Opening the door, Ron's face with worry written all over it came into view. "Hey man," Ron said, concern in his voice. "What happened?" Jason didn't answer, just sidled up to let Ron in. They walked into the living room, and Jason sat heavily back down on the couch while Ron sat in the armchair across from him. "Some wine?" Jason asked, already standing up and heading for the liquor cabinet. "Yeah," Ron nodded. "Looks like a night worthy of a drink." Jason poured 2 shots of whiskey, handed one of them to Ron, and resumed his seat. He stared at the amber-colored liquid in his glass, as if trying to find the answer to life in it. "Karen cheated on me," Jason finally said, his voice low and raspy. Ron sucked in a cold breath. "Jesus, Jason, I'm so sorry." Are you sure?" Jason laughed bitterly and got up to walk to the study. He came back with the brown craft paper bag in his hand. "Couldn't be more sure. Lately she's been coming home late on all sorts of excuses, and every time she smells like some other strange cologne. The cell phone is kept as close as one's own treasure, as if it were keeping some unseen secret. What pissed me off even more was when I was paying off her credit card and found so many luxury hotel orders, all while I was traveling, or she was home late. I felt so disturbed that I called a private investigator to look into it, and as a result," he said, dumping the photo on the coffee table. Ron picked up the photos and looked at them one after the other. With each one he looked at, his frown tightened. "Fuck," he said finally. "Who was that asshole?" "Greg Wilson." Jason finished his glass in one gulp, disgust in his tone. "Her boss." Jason stood up and walked over to the fireplace, staring at the pictures on the shelf. It was a wedding picture of him and Karen, and they looked so young and happy. Now the picture only made him cringe. "You know," Jason began, pain and resentment in his voice, "I used to think our marriage was perfect. I've given her everything, and she's just using me, cheating on me." Jason grabbed the picture frame violently and slammed it to the floor with all his might. Shards of glass scattered everywhere, just like his broken marriage. "I'm such an idiot, Ron," Jason continued, his voice filled with self-deprecation and anger. "I can't believe I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Those late returns, those sudden business trips, those perfunctory explanations, I believed it all." Ron listened quietly, letting Jason continue to pour it out. "You know what's ironic?" Jason turned to face Ron with a dangerous glint in his eye. "Just last week I was planning our 10th anniversary. I wanted to surprise her and take her to Hawaii. And her? She's too busy cheating on me with that asshole in the hotel." Jason sat back heavily on the couch and poured himself another drink. "I hate her, Ron. I hate her for cheating on me and for betraying our marriage. But what I hate even more is that she was able to lie to Emma as if nothing happened. How could she do this to our daughter?" Ron tries to comfort Jason. Maybe you guys can still salvage it? For Emma. Redeem?" Jason sneered, a flash of viciousness in his eyes. "No, Ron. Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired. Karen destroyed the family and my trust. I won't let her continue to hurt me and Emma." Jason stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the darkness. His voice was low and firm. "I'll make her pay, Ron. I'll make her regret what she's done." Ron looks at his friend and realizes that Jason is no longer the man who simply believed in love. He sees a soul twisted by betrayal and anger, a man brewing for revenge. It was late at night, and after Ron left, Jason sat alone in the dark living room. The clock on the wall ticked as if counting every second of his revenge plan. Jason closed his eyes as images of Karen and Greg being close to each other kept flashing through his mind. "You're going to regret this, Karen," Jason whispered, a cold gleam in his eyes. "I'm going to give you a taste of what it's like to be betrayed." Over the next few days, Jason's insides were like a volcano about to erupt. On the surface, he continues to go about his business and take care of Emma as if it's business as usual. But deep down, a shadowy plan is slowly taking shape. Friday night, Jason sat in his study with Karen's credit card bills and bank statements spread out in front of him. He scrutinized each transaction for possible clues. "The Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas," he read in a low voice, a glint of coldness in his eyes. "Looks like you two are having a good time, Karen." Jason opened his laptop and began to look up divorce lawyers. He wants to make sure he has the upper hand in the law and doesn't give Karen any chances. Just then, his cell phone vibrated. It was a text from Karen. "Honey, I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. I miss you and Emma so much." Jason stared at the screen and felt a wave of nausea. He didn't reply, just tossed the phone aside. When Karen pushed open the door to her house, Jason was sitting on the couch in the living room, playing with a glass in his hand. The air was filled with the aroma of whiskey and a suffocating silence. "Jason," tried Karen cautiously, "I'm back. Where's Emma?" Jason slowly raised his head, his eyes so cold that Karen shivered. "Emma's not home. Curious where she went? Now you're starting to care about your daughter?" Karen put down her suitcase and frowned in confusion. "What do you mean, Jason? Have you been drinking?" Jason sneered and suddenly slammed the glass in his hand down hard on the floor. Splinters flew everywhere, and Karen took a step back in fear. "And you have the fucking nerve to ask me if I've been drinking?" Jason stood up, anger burning in his eyes. "Tell me, Karen, does Greg's dick taste better than mine?" Karen's face instantly turned pale. "Jason, what are you talking about?" "Stop pretending," Jason roared, grabbing the photo on the coffee table and throwing it at Karen with a chop. "Open your eyes and see this. This is your masterpiece from Vegas." Karen looked at the photos scattered all over the floor and tears came to her eyes. "Jason, I don't know what to say." "Oh, now you don't know what to say?" Jason said sarcastically. "You were screaming quite a bit when we were in the hotel room. Was that Greg? You were great from the heart?" Karen crumbled to her knees and sobbed. "I'm sorry, Jason. I'm really sorry. I don't know what's gotten into me." "Sorry?" Jason looked at her coldly. "You think saying you're sorry makes up for everything? When you betrayed me, did it ever occur to you to say you were sorry? Did you think about Emma when you were moaning under Greg? Ever think about me?" Karen tries to get closer to Jason, but he pushes her away in disgust. "Don't touch me," Jason snapped. "Your hands just touched that asshole's body and I feel sick." "Jason, please," Karen cried. "I know I've made an unforgivable mistake, but I love you and I love Emma. We can start over." "Starting over?" Jason's voice was filled with mockery. "What do you think this is? Playing house? You're ruining everything, Karen. You destroyed our family. You destroyed my trust in you. You destroyed our marriage. You know what? I wish I'd never known you." Jason walks over to the window and turns his back on Karen. "I've contacted a lawyer," he said calmly, but with icy determination in his tone. "I want a divorce. And I'll show everyone what a bitch you are." Karen looked up in horror. "No, Jason. You can't do this. Think about Emma. Think about our family and friends." "Oh, now you think of Emma?" Jason turned, his gaze like a knife. "Why didn't you think of Emma when you welcomed your boss with open legs? When you lied to me over and over again, why didn't you think of our family and friends?" Jason approaches Karen and looks down on her. "Listen, Karen, from now on, you're a stranger to me. A stranger I once thought I knew, but was actually disgusted to the bone. You can continue to stay in the guest house until the divorce is finalized. But remember, you've disqualified yourself from being a wife and don't expect to be a good mother." After saying that, Jason strides towards the study, leaving Karen alone in the living room crying bitterly. After closing the door, he leaned against it and took a deep breath. Tears finally came to his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. He knew that this was just the beginning. The real plan for revenge is just kicking off. Jason sat in his study with the heartbreaking photos spread out in front of him. Each one was like a sharp knife, stabbing deep into his heart. But now, these photos will be his weapon of revenge. He took a deep breath and started to move. First, he selected a few of the most impactful photos that clearly showed Karen and Greg in an intimate embrace and kiss. Then he turned on his computer and logged on to an anonymous mail service website. "Let's see what your coworkers think when they find out the truth, honey," Jason sneered to himself. At that moment, he remembered Karen's address book in the study. and quickly went to the study to sit there and carefully input Karen's company address book into the system too. Make sure that every colleague would receive this special gift. In the envelope, in addition to the photo, he included a note. This is the true colors of your esteemed Karen Chandler and GM Greg Wilson. A couple of backstabbing liars. Once the sending was complete, Jason turned to social media. He opened his Facebook account, took a deep breath, and then began composing a long post. I never thought I'd be sharing something so personal and painful here one day. But silence only allows the wound to continue to fester. My wife, Karen Chandler, betrayed me, betrayed our marriage. She was having an affair with her boss, Greg Wilson. Jason goes on to write, describing how he found out the truth and how it hurt him and Emma. He worded it carefully, expressing both his pain and hinting at Karen's infidelity and Greg's impudence. Finally, he wrote, I want to remind all the women I know to please watch your husbands. Some people just love to seduce married men, not caring what kind of damage they can do to someone's family. Protect your families and don't let the tragedy happen again. Jason hesitated for a moment and then decided to include a couple of relatively mild photos. The photos don't directly show intimacy, but the flirty vibe between Karen and Greg is palpable. After clicking publish, Jason felt a thrill of revenge. He knew that the post would soon be circulating in their social circles. Next came the hardest part. Telling Emma, Jason walked over to Emma's room and knocked gently on the door. Emma, baby, can I come in? We need to talk. Emma looked up at her father with doubt and concern in her eyes. Daddy, what happened? Why is Mommy always crying these days? Jason sat on the edge of Emma's bed and gently held his daughter's hand. Emma, sometimes the adult world is complicated. Mom did something very wrong. She betrayed me and our family. Betrayal? Emma asked, confused. What does that mean? Jason weighed the words. It means Mom is with another man, not with Dad. It's very wrong behavior and destroys our family. Tears started to come to Emma's eyes. So, are we still family then? Jason took Emma into his arms. We'll always be family, baby. There might be some changes. But no matter what happens, I will always love you and protect you. By the end of his conversation with Emma, Jason felt both exhausted and relieved. He knew the next few days would be tough, but at least the truth was out in the open. The next day, the effects began to show. Jason drops Emma off at school and notices that the other parents look at him with sympathy and curiosity. A few mothers even came up to me to show their support. Jason, we're all behind you, said Sarah, the mother of Emma's best friend. What Karen did was too much. Meanwhile, Karen's cell phone kept ringing. Her coworkers, friends, and even some clients received those photos. Her social media feeds were filled with condemnation and insulting comments. When Karen hysterically stormed into the den to confront Jason, he just looked at her coldly. You've ruined me. Karen screamed, my career, my friends, it's all over. Jason replied calmly, no, Karen, you're the one who ruined everything. I'm just letting the truth come out. Just then, Jason's cell phone vibrated. It was a text message from an unknown number. I know more about Karen and Greg. If you want the whole truth, meet me tomorrow at noon in City Park. Jason stared at the message, his heart racing. He didn't know if this was a trap or an opportunity, but he knew there was no turning back on this path of revenge. Whatever awaited him ahead, he had to face it. The next day at noon, the sun was shining and people were coming and going in the city park. Jason sat on the promised bench, his nerves on edge. His eyes kept scanning everyone around him, trying to guess which one might be the one who sent the mysterious text message. Suddenly, a thin, middle-aged woman sat down next to him. She wore large sunglasses and her hair was covered by a hat that looked deliberately disguised. Jason Chandler, she whispered. Jason nodded warily. It's me. Who are you? You said you knew more about Karen? The woman looked around for a moment, then pulled an envelope out of her bag. I'm Greg's wife, Christy. Her voice quivered. I think you should see these. Jason took the envelope, which contained a stack of photos and a few pieces of paper. The photos show Karen and Greg in intimate behavior on various occasions, some even more explicit than what Jason has seen before. In the pieces of paper, They were email exchanges between Karen and Greg. Jesus, Jason whispered, feeling a wave of vertigo. These? When did these happen? Christy smiled bitterly. The earliest dates back 2 years. I've been gathering evidence that was going to lead to a lawsuit against Greg. But, her voice choked, but I realized it wasn't just Karen. Greg has other lovers. Jason felt a wave of nausea. He peruses the emails and realizes that Karen and Greg had more than a simple affair. They've also discussed how to hide their relationship and even planned how to handle a possible pregnancy. Why are you telling me this? Jason asked, his voice hoarse. Christy took off her sunglasses and Jason then saw the deep dark circles under her eyes. Because I've had enough, she said. I want revenge, but I don't have the courage. When I saw your posts on social media, I knew you would do what I was afraid to do. Jason was silent for a moment, then asked, What are you going to do? Divorce? Christy nodded. Yes, I've contacted a lawyer. But Jason, I want to warn you about something. Her voice suddenly became serious. Greg is not to be messed with. He has many connections and is very influential in the business world. If you continue to confront him openly like this, you could get into trouble. Jason sneered, I'm not afraid of him. He ruined my family, and I'm going to make him pay. Just then, Jason's cell phone rang. It's his company number. Hey, Jason. It was his supervisor, Mike, on the other end of the line. His voice sounded serious. Can you come by the office immediately? There's something we need to talk about in person. Jason frowned. Is something wrong, Mike? Mike was silent for a moment, then said, It's best to say it in person. It's about your position. After hanging up, Jason felt a pang of unease. He turned to Christy. Thank you for telling me that. I've got to go. There's been some problems with the company. Christy nodded. Be careful, Jason. Don't let hate cloud your reasoning. Jason rushed to the office and sensed the atmosphere was off as soon as he entered. His coworkers' eyes were averted, and no one dared to look directly at him. Mike led Jason into the conference room where several of the company's executives were already waiting. Jason, Mike spoke up, regret in his voice. We've received some complaints. Some clients have indicated that they no longer trust you to handle their accounts given your recent words and actions on social media. Jason felt an icy chill. What does that mean? John, the CEO of the company, sighed, meaning, Jason, we'll have to let you go for a while, at least until this storm dies down. Jason's eyes widened. Are you guys kidding? I've been working here for 10 years, and I've never made a mistake. And now you're going to fire me because I exposed my wife's infidelity. Not dismissal, Mike said hastily. Just a temporary vacation. When things settle down. Enough. Jason roared. I get it. It's Greg, right? Is he behind this? The room looked at each other. No one answered. Jason sneered. Good, very good. You guys want me to go? I'll go. But remember, it's not over. With that said, Jason turned and left the conference room. As he walked out the front door of the office, his cell phone rang again. It's a new text message. Looks like you're in trouble. If you want to help, see you tonight at 8 p.m. at the usual place. This time, I'll show you how to really get your revenge. Jason stared at the message and felt a rush of hot blood. He knew that he was standing at an important crossroads. Will it stop there, or will it continue deeper into this game of revenge? In any case, he knew his life had changed forever. And that is just the beginning. As night falls, the city park is shrouded in dimness. Jason stood by the promised bench, conflicted and anxious. The shock of losing his job still haunts him, but more than that, it's the anger and desire for revenge against Greg. There you are. A low male voice came from behind. Jason turned around and saw a stocky, middle-aged man standing there. Jason barely recognized the man in the dim light. David, said Jason in surprise, did you send that text? David nodded. He is the former CFO of Greg's company, who abruptly resigned 2 years ago, causing quite a stir at the time. I think you've gotten a taste of Greg by now, David said, gesturing for Jason to sit down. Losing your job is just the beginning. If you continue to fight him, it will get worse. Jason clenched his fists. So what do you suggest I do? Just give up? David shook his head and pulled a flash drive out of his briefcase. This has everything you need. Greg's black material, evidence of his crimes, and some of his intracorporate, unclean dealings. Jason took the flash drive and felt a wave of vertigo. Why did you give me these? What do you want? David smiled bitterly. 2 years ago, I found out about some of Greg's offenses, but when I tried to expose him, he set me up in turn and forced me to resign. Since then, I've been gathering evidence and waiting for the right moment. Then why now? Why me? Jason pursued. Because you had the motive and the courage. David looked Jason straight in the eye. And besides, you've got nothing to lose, do you? Jason looked down at the flash drive in his hand and felt a strong surge of power through his body. What should I do? David leaned in close to Jason and lowered his voice. That's enough evidence to put Greg in jail. But be careful, he has a lot of protection. You need to find the right moment to strike a blow. Jason nodded and suddenly thought of something. Wait, is Karen mentioned in any of this information? David's expression became complicated. There. Jason, you need to be prepared. Karen, she's not just Greg's lover. She was also involved in some illegal transactions. The news hit Jason like a hammer. Hard. He felt a spinning in the air and had to hold on to a bench to stay on his feet. I need time to digest this, Jason said with difficulty. David patted him on the shoulder. Take your time. But remember, opportunities are fleeting. Greg is probably alerted by now, and you need to move fast. Jason took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. I understand. Thank you, David. When he got home, Jason immediately opened the flash drive. As one file is opened, the true nature of Greg and Karen is revealed. Illegal money transfers, fraudulent real estate transactions. Jason felt his world fall apart again. Jason got up early the next morning. He had barely slept last night, his mind constantly replaying the contents of the flash drive. The shocking evidence kept flashing through his mind. Illegal money transfers, bogus real estate deals, and traces of Karen's involvement. Dad? Emma came out of her room rubbing her sleepy eyes. Why are you up so early? Jason looked at his daughter's innocent face, and a strong determination suddenly surged in his heart. He crouched down and held Emma tightly in his arms. It's okay, baby, he said softly. Daddy has some important things to take care of today. Aunt Sarah will be here later to pick you up from school, okay? After dropping Emma off, Jason took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope with the flash drive, and drove downtown. The office of the prosecutor is housed in a stately building. Jason walked into the lobby and asked the receptionist, I need to see the prosecutor. I have important evidence to present. The wait seemed like a century. Finally, a middle-aged woman stepped forward and introduced herself. Hi, I'm Jennifer Thompson, Chief Assistant District Attorney. I hear you have important information to give. Jason nodded and handed her the envelope. It contains evidence of crimes committed by Greg Wilson, the managing director of Acme Realty, including illegal money transfers, false transactions, and more. He paused, and my wife, Karen Chandler, is also involved. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. That's a major accusation, Mr. Chandler. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm pretty sure, Jason said firmly, that I want to be able to report it anonymously. I understand, Jennifer nodded. We'll review the evidence carefully. If true, we will take immediate action. But you have to realize that once the investigation starts, it could affect a lot of people, including yourself and your family. Jason laughed bitterly. My life is ruined. Right now, I just want justice. After leaving the DA's office, Jason felt a strange sense of relief. He knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. However, he didn't expect the change to come so quickly. Later that afternoon, the news broke that Acme Realty was suspected of massive financial fraud. Greg Wilson was taken away to assist in the investigation. The company's stock plummeted, and the entire city was shaken. Jason's cell phone kept ringing with messages from former coworkers and friends. Some speculate that he reported it, some sympathize with him, and others blame him for ruining so many people's jobs. But what alarmed Jason the most was Karen's reaction. She called him frantically and finally rushed straight to the house. You did it, didn't you? Karen shouted hysterically. How could you do this? Do you realize how many lives you've ruined? Jason looked at her calmly. No, Karen. You and Greg are the ones who ruined it. I'm just letting the truth come out. Karen sat paralyzed on the couch, tears falling down her face. You don't understand, she sobbed. Greg, he's got a lot of connections. He's not going to let this end like that. Over the next few months, the entire city was plunged into a storm like no other. The Acme Realty scandal is like dominoes implicating more corruption and crime. The scope of the investigation by the Office of the Prosecutor continues to expand, involving a number of prominent figures in politics and business. 5 years later, the city's turmoil has finally subsided. Greg Wilson was sentenced to 15 years in prison for multiple counts of financial fraud. He spent his last years in prison. Karen served her 5-year sentence. After her release from prison, she tried to rebuild her life. But society's prejudices and her own past made it difficult for her to find stable employment. She ended up working as an administrative assistant for a small nonprofit organization and began a new life that was mundane and full of regret. Jason's life has also changed dramatically. Although his career suffered in the first few years, his honesty and courage were eventually recognized. He became a well-respected business ethics consultant and frequently spoke at major corporations and schools to share his experiences. Emma is slowly coming out of her haze under the care of her father. Although her childhood experiences have cast some psychological shadows, they have also made her more mature than her peers. She aspires to be a lawyer and wants to be a voice for justice. The day Karen was released, Jason and Emma came to pick her up at the prison gate. "Jason, Emma," Karen said softly, her eyes apologetic and hopeful. "Thank you for picking me up." Jason nodded, his expression calm. On the way home, Karen finally spoke up. "Jason, I know it's probably too late, but I'm really deeply sorry for what I did. I've had a lot of time to reflect over the years, and I've finally realized how serious a mistake I made. I hurt you. I hurt Emma. I hurt so many innocent people. I hope to be forgiven by you." Jason was silent for a moment, then slowly said, "Karen, I understand your remorse and I appreciate your apology. But some things, once they happen, cannot be undone. I won't stop you from visiting Emma. She needs her mother's love. But I will never forgive you for what you did. Betrayal hurts too much, and some rifts can't be mended." Karen lowered her head, tears slipping down her face. She understood that this was the price of betrayal. That night, Jason stood on his balcony, staring at the stars. He remembered the ups and downs of the years and had mixed feelings. He understands that every choice in life has its price, but when faced with betrayal and injustice, it is never wrong to choose to stick to the truth. For only in this way can we create a more honest and just world for the next generation. Even if it means paying a huge price, even if it means losing a once cherished relationship. Jason took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air. He knew that there was a long road ahead, but he was ready to move on. Because in the end, the power of honesty and integrity will prevail over betrayal and deception. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.